Hello, I hope you guys had a great weekend. Sorry about yesterday. Things just did not work out. I was not able to get online. They do have my internet hooked up now, and everything looks like it's going ahead just fine. So I am recording this, and I will post it just as soon as I get done. Now we're doing really a pretty good job with the class so far. We're going along really well. We only have a couple more weeks left um, in this semester, and I wanted some feedback from you guys. Is there any section that we want to go over a little bit more so you guys are more comfortable with it? Let me know if there's something that we haven't touched that you guys want to talk about. And otherwise, I think that what I will do is the last week or two of class, we'll go over projects that have been turned in, and we'll talk to people about how they did, or if people aren't on the call, that's fine too. I'll talk about what's really good and what is working. And then if you need to go back and reassess your project and everything, that's just fine. Uh, because we will be talking about um, the projects. Let's see. Is I wanted to talk this week about the final project creating for the Mali Empire. And so today we're going to be talking about contemporary art, and I will mention that as well. So I hope, let's see, I'm just making sure that everything is working, and it looks like everything's working. All right, this is great. This is what we need to see. We hear words like modern and postmodern and contemporary, and I wanted to let you know what those mean in an art setting. We've been looking at modern art, and modern art is a period of art that is marked specifically by moving away from primarily representational. And some of the movements we looked at, like Impressionism, it is kind of different, but it's still very representational. People are still doing landscapes and people that they're showing. And modern art is started, it's really difficult to talk about time periods when these things start because people are trying different things. And sometimes some people will say, well, this is definitely modern art, and other times other people will say, no, this is not. But generally, we're looking at about the year 1900. That is when artists start doing things that are not strictly representational. Now, they were doing that a little bit before. You'll see some of the Impressionists were doing stuff like that. But artists are intending specifically to move away, or I should not all artists, but generally a lot of artists are tending to push away from the strictly representational. I think we really saw that with Cubism, Dada, and Surrealism, because in those things, yeah, there was some stuff that referenced the real life things. There's things that looked like they were done in a really tight and realistic manner. But the intent of the artist is not to help you understand a story, and it's not to tell you necessarily a story, but it's the shift is that the modern artists are trying to get you just to engage with the awareness of the creative process or the awareness of the artist making art. Modern art generally is marked by people exploring a specific style or a specific medium, a specific way of applying paint, like Jackson Pollock and dribbling paint, or a specific way of making shapes. And generally, there's not going to be an awful lot more to it than that. It's shape and form without a lot of thought content behind it necessarily, other than the thoughts revolving just around the process. Postmodern is there's artists are still dealing with the application of paint and form and shape, but this time they're trying to help communicate to you as a viewer some meaning as well. So there's more content to it. And then contemporary just means what's going on right now. Modern is generally going to be from about 1900 on up to about 1950, 1960 maybe. Postmodern is going to be anything after that. And contemporary is going to be anything from since 1990 up till now. And I'm not being really strict or tight on these timeframes because they're loose umbrellas for categorizing and for placing things. It's not, there's no hard and fast rule about what's going on. So when we talk about contemporary art, I'm generally going to be talking about stuff that happened probably since the 80s, since the 90s up until now. So some of it's going to be happening right now, but a lot of it is going to be the last 20, 30 years. These are not movements that, these don't belong to movements that we can quickly categorize. Like if I showed you some Impressionism, you would be able to pick out, yeah, that's Impressionism, and this is why, kind of thing. For contemporary art, the only giveaways are, could it have been done at any other time period? And that's sometimes really hard to tell. If you have somebody working only with computer-generated digital art, that's going to be a very contemporary thing. But if you have a contemporary artist that is re-examining oil painting, they're still going to be contemporary, but it's not going to be easy to see that unless you know. This is kind of a confusing time for easy categorization of art. So I'm telling you all that just to prepare you. When artists, oh, that's interesting. There's supposed to be an image. There we go. There's an image. When artists have worked traditionally up until about 150 years ago, they've been trained for a style. They've been able to explore that style. They have a set of subject matter within which they can work. They usually the relationship between the artist and the collector, or the artist and the viewer, was one of the artist makes and the other person buys. And that's pretty much the depth of the relationship. With contemporary art, what we are looking at is a result of all the mental shifts that have been happening for the last 100, 150 years. We talk about abstraction and abstract expressionism. Things are very different because artists were able to show what was going on in their mind, show what they were thinking about, show what they were feeling without having to tie it into a real world object or a real world story that other people could enjoy. Because of that, abstract artists and abstract expressionists essentially gave every artist permission to explore the idea of sharing what you're actually thinking. And what that does, if somebody else doesn't understand it, it forces, if you're interested in understanding it, you have to form some sort of association with the artist. Either you have to contact them, you have to read what they write about it, you have to read articles about what they do in order to wrap your head around what you're seeing, if that's something that you want to engage in. And abstract expressionism and non-objective art, these kinds of modern and postmodern art movements made it so that we as viewers have to participate significantly in the understanding of the art ourselves. We have to give it meaning ourselves. We have to think about it, read what the artists have written, do something to engage ourselves with the art on more than just passing by and looking at it. And that's if we want to understand it, if it's interesting enough to us that we want to understand it. With things like plastic production, digital media, uh, fibers based on petroleum, um, different scientific techniques even to use to cook food, computers, all these kinds of things did not exist 100 years ago. And if you put that permission on expression, that abstraction allowed, and you put that next to all these different um, inventions that people can use to make stuff with, what you get is a field of art where pretty much the only thing that's limiting is your imagination as an artist. What can you do? I mean, I was watching a TV show a while ago about an artist that uses science in the kitchen, and he has this high-end restaurant where he will do things like freeze things with nitrogen, right before serving it to the customers. Or uh, another artist has learned how to carve things like melons really, really fast, and they can create a dessert that is a beautiful sculpture, before you even start eating it. And that's just with food. And so there's all sorts of different kinds of things. And then there's sound artists who will make samples, they'll walk around in an area and take samples of the sounds and then somehow put them together into a piece of sound engineering where it's not really music like we're thinking of it, but produces like a sound environment. And so there's lots of different things that artists have been doing. We're going to look at a few of them, and I'm going to talk about each of them. Now, this is Cicely Brown. Now, you look at those canvases behind her. This reminds me a lot of Lee Kresnik and Jackson Pollock. It just looks like spatter paintings. But how she gets there is really, really interesting. What she does is she's actually a figure painter. And it doesn't look like that. I don't see a human being in there much at all. But how she creates, she thinks of herself as a figure painting because of what inspires these shapes behind her. These shapes are derived. She'll look at a model, and the shapes and the colors come from her perception of what she sees on the model or as relating to the model. So this horizontal line right here might be the top of a shoulder, for example. This patch right here might be a reflection of light off their hair. These areas might be the bottoms of their foot. And what makes it interesting is that she'll take these shapes that she sees that are inspired by the model. Maybe some of these colors come from the model, what the model looks like, their hair color or whatever they're wearing. But what Cicely will do is she'll take those shapes and apply them, sometimes with the color that she sees, sometimes with a completely different color. And she will apply them just in different areas that are almost appear random, where this short line that is inspired by the shoulder is completely away from on a different part of the canvas from where it originally was. And what she's doing is she's trying to engage people in just the activity of the paint, for one thing. There's a lot of activity, a lot of energy going there. But she's also asking people to consider individual elements of the human form rather than the entire being. And conversely, that a person is made up of more than the individual elements. So if you can imagine taking a picture of a family, for example, and then cutting it up into a bunch of little shapes and then rearranging those shapes in a completely different way, it's not going to look like the picture of the family. It's still going to be based on that, but it's not going to look like that at all. And it kind of forces you as a viewer, if you want to take the energy, spend the energy, it forces you as a viewer to examine and think about what you're looking at. Can you see elements of a human form in this? I can see portions of what look like might be faces. I can see portions of what look like might be folds of skin or maybe an ear, but it's very difficult to see an overall body. And that's just the point. She's talking about, she's addressing ideas like how sometimes we feel pulled many different ways. Sometimes we feel fragmented as human beings. Sometimes we don't feel like we belong or we're all together. And I think that communicates those ideas of fractured desire for longing that is pretty consistent with today's world. So a very interesting way of painting. Now, Jean-Michel Basquiat, he's a person who has inspired your studio exercise for this week. He came, I want to say Haiti. I can't remember. He came from a really tiny island and came to the US and just started painting what he saw or his reactions to what he saw in the cityscape around him. So his paintings are not straightforward paintings. They start to become collages. Let's see if we can. I'm just seeing if I can, if it will work for me to get to his. Okay, look at this. So here he is, and he's sitting in front of several of the paintings that he's done. Now think about, as you're walking through a big city, you're going to see all sorts of things, graffiti on the walls, people, dirty things cut up against the hallways of alleys. You're going to see people where people have scribbled. You're going to see where people have either taped or glued or stapled posters that have torn off over time. Maybe somebody painted something in the front window of their store and set something up behind it. But over time, all that stuff kind of gets blended together, but there's a particular visual texture. And what he started doing in painting that, this particular thing that I'm showing you is him applying his art to an album by a group called The Offs. And it just shows how he goes about making it. But I think if we look at this image, we can kind of see where some of the graffiti comes from, some of the scribble drawing comes from. You know, it's this idea of the urban, the cityscape sprawl. And I'm going to see if I can. I want to show you some more pictures of work that he did. And I think he passed away sadly before he did an awful lot, but his stuff I think is really amazing. You know, look at some of these. He has this figure that he uses. He has a specific style that he uses for those scribble figures. And there's a lot of things that he writes, and then a lot of collage that goes on, because it's, you know, you go through, I don't know if you've been to a really big city and gone downtown where there's constant activity and constant layers of posters and writing and things like that. A lot of this is him sharing that experience. And I think it's really, really interesting stuff, but it's not, we can't really call it a specific or a different genre. It is entirely his genre that he pretty much worked on, that is this collage of impressions, shapes, and colors that you get just from walking along a city. So what he's taken is he's taken a background and he's trying to make it look like one of these graffitied walls. So he uses that as a background. That's his wall. And then on this, he's applied some paper, and he's done some painting, this cream painting over the blue that's on the paper. On top of that, he's used things like chalk and markers. In some areas, he will also take and glue, make separate drawings and glue them on what he's developing. And so there's this visual texture that is really unusual and distinctive. I think these are really good examples of his work as well. And you can see he has a stylized form that he uses for the human body, human face. It makes it very interesting. And on this, you can also see some things where he's done separately and pasted them in place or glued them in place. Now, Andy Warhol, he was a champion of Basquiat's work. Andy Warhol is a fascinating character, very interesting individual. I don't know if you've seen his portrayal in the Men in Black movie. I think it was Men in Black 3. But some of the things that Andy Warhol was doing, he was actually concerned with how people were moving away from being people and focusing on advertising. And he thought that by presenting the objects of advertising as covetable art objects, he kind of demonstrated a little bit of that. And so he has these famous portraits of Marilyn Monroe, who was arguably one of the most well-known women of her day. And she was a celebrity. The thing that she did that was so big was being a celebrity. That was her brand. And she was an actor. She also sang, but her performance was being herself, and people loved it. And this, he does a portrait of her in the same kind of pose that you'll see portraits of royalty in England, which and Europe. I think is absolutely fascinating. But silkscreen was like one of the preeminent advertising media, and so this is a silkscreen. Did the same kind of thing with the Campbell soup can, making a very dramatic, obvious image that's, again, arguing back to these portrait and icon style layouts of Europe during the Middle Ages, but it's a soup can. It's making an ordinary object. It's showing how important commercial products have become for people. I think that's one of the things that he's dealing with. And again, this is silkscreen as well. Now, Marina Abramovich, I really like her. She is incredibly brave, but she's not doing art like what we've seen. What we've seen is 3 people, rapid succession, all do paintings. What Abramovich does, Marina, she does something very different. With paintings, the tool the artist uses is the paint and the brush, and they create a painting. What Marina was doing is called conceptual art. And conceptual art is when what the artist's making are new thoughts and new ideas in your head. And they may use film, they may use paint, they may use a painting, they may use things they make, but those are just tools to sculpt whatever thought they want in your head, just like Andy Warhol's silkscreen was a tool to make the Marilyn Monroe art piece. So Marina does things specifically to get you to think. She was born in Serbia, and her there was another artist that she really liked. They were very like-minded people. Their work is not the same, but they are very interesting. And his name is Ule. This is called a performance piece, where they will just stand in front of each other, completely quiet and looking at each other, raise their hands slowly and touch their fingertips, and they'll slowly put their hand back down. And they'll do that over and over again. Last count, they've done it for a total of 700 hours. The piece is called Point of Contact. Now, of course, you can say, oh, it's just two people looking at each other and then touching fingers. But she knows that her audience have come to see artwork. So it is being presented as artwork. It's called a performance piece or performance artwork. So she knows that the context requires that it's be artwork. That's what people are expecting. And we're talking about 1980s. This is when people are coming out of the 70s. We're trying to establish a new type of professionalism. People have been moving around the country and are trying to become stable again. There was the oil crisis that appears to be coming to a close. There were several Iranian people that were held hostage in Iran for, by this time, I think a couple months, but ended up being over a year total. A lot of change happening in the world, and it seems that a lot of people felt they were drifting apart from each other. So if you come into a gallery, you're already kind of open and receptive to see something you haven't seen before. And then you see two people looking at each other and slowly moving their hands up and touching fingertips and moving their hands down, doing that over and over again. You're going to start asking yourself questions like, well, why are they doing this? Who are they to each other? And ideally, you'll start thinking about, well, what are they to each other? Do they have some social connection to each other? Do they like each other? Why is it that they're not hugging each other or shaking hands? Why are they only touching fingertips? Why are they looking at each other the whole time instead of looking away? And it starts making you ask questions like that lead you to an area where you start thinking about relationships in general, how people interact, how a man and a woman interact, how we interact as family members or friends. And it starts becoming something that she's sculpting in your brain an interior conversation just about social activities, social connection, social awareness, and belonging. I think it's a pretty amazing piece. And it looks ostensibly really simple. And then this is one of her most famous pieces. There were a couple that she did that were really pretty scary. But what she did was she and Ule decided they wanted to get married, and they decided to do it on a certain date. So they got one of them went at one end of the Great Wall of China, another one went to the other end, and they started walking toward each other with the planning everything else so that they would meet on the day that they wanted to get married. This thing is incredibly long. And they did finally get permission to do it. It took years working with the Chinese government to get the permission, but they filmed everything. And it ended up being that they walked a total of 3 months towards each other to get to a point where they could actually see each other on the last day and get married. So it was quite a feat. And you're thinking, okay, well, they walked. They took photos of it. They did interviews about it as they were doing it and stuff like that. You're thinking, okay, all they did is walk. Who cares? People do that all the time. And that's true. People do. But by making this into something specific and purposeful, she starts getting people to think about things like, well, why are they walking towards each other? That's awful long way. What is the incentive for them to walk towards each other? Is it worth walking towards somebody else that many thousands of miles, that many thousands of kilometers? Is it worth it? What's what are the other issues at play? We're still talking about a time period where people around the world feel disconnected. And I think that one of the things that one of the sets of ideas that this generated in viewers' minds was the idea that it might be okay to go this far out of your way for somebody when you care about them. Maybe making contact with somebody is worth extra effort. And those kinds of ideas are the kinds of ideas that show up in the mind of somebody who views conceptual art when it's like this. It's going to change for each piece that each performance art piece that you see, each conceptual art piece that you see. But it's all about the construction of the ideas inside your head, not about what they are actually doing. So this is where they finally meet, in the middle of the Great Wall. And then, I want to read this paragraph to you. One thing that I feel about Abramovich's work adds to the world of artistic dialogue is a very personal kind of poetry. This is not a poetry that deals with words or rhyming. This is a poetry that deals with behavior, I think. This Great Wall piece is categorized as a performance, but it's such a deeply personal ritual to have completed. It speaks so deeply to the very architecture of Abramovich's creative and romantic life. It's much more connected to who she is as a person than a normal theater piece where an actress speaks written lines in front of an audience. I think that's completely true because you're seeing both of them go through something very arduous. It's just walking, but it's walking for a long time, 3 months. And they're doing it. The incentive is to be together. I think that's really fascinating. And hopefully it helps you, it makes you think about things. Now, here's another conceptual artist. His name is Wolfgang Leib. What he does is things that are strikingly large or impactful visually. But the way he goes about making them and the materials he used make you think, well, what is going on? Why is this so important to him? And then it starts making you think about what those materials represent. Again, he's sculpting inside your mind. So what he does, among other things, one of his series is he will go into the landscape and collect pollen in jars. And he collects massive amounts of pollen. And you can imagine how little pollen there is on any given flower. He will collect huge amounts of this. And then what he does is he'll put out a mat on the floor where he displays it, and he'll sprinkle the pollen in simple shapes like circles, squares, and rectangles. And then when you see it, it looks like this. I mean, it's a graphically interesting shape. It's really large. You're staying on the balcony. It's probably amazing to look at, but it's not paint, it's pollen. And these people, as they're walking around on the floor next to it, as they look at it and start realizing, oh, this is pollen, then they're going to start thinking, how did he get the pollen? Did he collect it himself? He had to collect it from a lot of flowers. How many flowers did he have to use, I wonder? Why is he doing it like this? What does a pollen mean? Does it symbolize something? And there's a couple places that Wolfgang directs a person's mind to go just through his art. And if you look at it for a while, after a while, you find your mind gravitating to those places. And this includes thoughts about, what about those flowers? How are they going to reproduce? This is so much pollen. How much time did it take him to collect it? I wonder where he went. Where did he go? Why is it the simple shape? What does the pollen mean? Now, simple shapes, I think, are reflective of the idea that he wants you to think about the basics. What are the basics? What are the fundamental basics? And I think one of the fundamental basics is going to be life. And of course, I am injecting my own thoughts onto this, and anybody who sees it is going to do the same thing. And for a conceptual artist, that's fine. What is sculpted inside of your imagination is not as important as that they are impacting it. So I'm thinking maybe the circle, square, and rectangle shapes mean that this is a reference to something that's fundamental. And the pollen, that can deal with flowers, but they can also deal with life itself. It's a factor in reproduction. It's a factor in food production. And it becomes a symbol very quickly for the undisturbed or natural world. And then you start thinking, well, what? Maybe he's asking us to reflect on the idea that we are related, that fundamentally life is present, and that fundamentally life can be fragile too. So I think it's absolutely fascinating work. He does a lot of very interesting things. Now, this is a guy that I think is just the shiz. I don't know if you young but few people use that word anymore. Probably not. I think this guy is absolutely amazing. I think he's incredible. What he does is collect garbage, essentially. He collects, where he's from in Ghana, milk is sold in bottles with metal lids. And he also, so he'll collect bottle caps from milk bottles, but he'll also collect the tops off soda pop bottles and soda pop cans. He'll collect beer cans. He'll collect all sorts of stuff like this that is essentially metal garbage. And he will create these little things out of it with metal rings around it. And then he'll have his assistants help him put them together in these incredible shapes. Now, this is made of pop cans, or beer cans rather. If you can see how tiny that is right there in this photo, that is the size of a regular soda pop can. Then you get an idea of how massive this thing is. It's large. It is very large. There are some museums that aren't big enough to display the things he makes. But he will take this discarded metal garbage and transform it into these tapestry-like forms that he hangs on walls. So they look sometimes like they're billowing with the wind. Sometimes they look like they're just falling naturally. But it's amazing to me because he comes from a country that is not looked highly on by the rest of the world. It's Ghana. He's using garbage that everybody else has discarded. And because of what he does, he employs a lot of people, giving them a better life, essentially, because they have a steady income. But he also is transforming this garbage that becomes a metaphor for how the rest of the world views Ghana into something that it truly is, something that's absolutely beautiful. What is amazing to me is that the sharp edges of the metal disappear, and this feels like a flowing fabric. I think it's incredible. He's not trying to turn it into a specific flag. He doesn't want it to be. He's not trying to turn it into a specific textile, like a carpet or anything like that. He doesn't want it to be that either. What he does want is you to feel the flowing nature of the textile and to see how that metal, sharp metal, is transformed into something that is soft and becoming powerful. In the attendance for this time, you can get a couple extra credit points. I have a short video for you to watch that talks about El Anatsui and his work. If you watch that and write a comment about it, following the directions in the assignment, you will get extra credit for it. So this is a close-up, and you can see here those can lids that I was telling you about. And here you can see these are labels for beer cans. So he's have people cut beer cans, open them up, and take the labels off so you can use the labels. So each of these squares is about 2.5 inches, right around there. It gives you an idea of the scale. It is not tiny. So yeah, I think Ilan Tsui is amazing because he has created a specific type of art that makes people think about a lot of different things, and he's made it happen out of garbage. So yeah, I'm going to scroll back up again, just look at that. So some of the questions I think that we can lead to is, we've already talked about how it's garbage and metal transformed into something that can be powerful and beautiful. Maybe he's talking about how this is a veil that separates people from the true perception of where he's from. Because Africa as a continent is not what Western media, social media portrays it to be. It's a beautiful, vibrant network of cultures. There is more genetic diversity among the human beings that live on the continent of Africa than all the rest of the population of the world together. There are some astounding things. And maybe this represents a veil or a wall between everybody else and their perception of the reality of Africa. And maybe it's just sharing some idea of magnificence, because this is a huge thing that is very powerful to see simply because of the size. And maybe it's also talking about, it could be referencing something to do with the ever-present nature of garbage too. I mean, he is using garbage in this after all. So there's several different things that we can think as we look at this, but what Ilan Tsui is doing is sculpting our imagination again. Very interesting. Now this is the assignment page, and a couple people are doing this already, and they're seeing some really fascinating things. What you're doing is recording you talking about your PowerPoint. And I have had people that decided they weren't going to turn this in simply because they couldn't get PowerPoint to work and record their voice. And that's really not an excuse, because you guys are all creative enough, you can find other ways of doing it. It was very difficult for me to get that to happen. And so what ended up being, I set the phone on a tripod and recorded the phone, recorded the images on the screen of my computer while the phone recorded my voice, and made it into a video like that. So that's a really good way of doing it. Another student set up their own Teams meeting, essentially to an empty room, and recorded themselves giving the presentation in the form of a Teams meeting. So the slides are on the computer and they did screen sharing. And that works really good. So you have picked an artist to learn about. You learned about them and where you could find more information in Module 6. And then you wrote an annotated bibliography in Module 9. And I will go through and grade those this week as well. And I do want to stress that if at any point you get a grade less than what you're hoping for or expect, we have a couple of weeks that we can go through and revisit, and you can return in anything you want, anything you need to. And that's true for all of the quizzes. If you didn't get a perfect score on the quiz, you should be able to retake it as many times as you want. So this PowerPoint, you will be doing it on the same artist that you use for your ongoing research in modules 3, 6, and 9. So it can't be a new artist. It has to be the same artist you've already been learning about. And there are directions that we'll go to right now and look at that. Okay, here's the direction. The instructions are, you'll make a 3 to 5 minute PowerPoint with 5 slides and record it using the Record tab in your PowerPoint program, part of your Microsoft suite. you do not have access to PowerPoint, it doesn't work, there are other ways to get it to work. So I don't want you to miss out on the points and not turn it in because it doesn't work right the first time. So, and I've had other people come up with completely different things too. One person, the only thing that they could get it to, a way they could get it to work was by doing it on Vimeo. And that's perfectly fine too. And you can either turn it in by sending a link to where it is on your own video page, or you can turn it in by sending the file. The file has to be WAV, MP, or MP4. You know, one of those video standard video files. And if it's, I have had people turn things in that my computer would not recognize, and all they had to do to get points was to take the file and put it through one of the file translators, the file format translators that you can get use online for free with your computer. So here's an example of PowerPoint. And I think what I'm going to do as well is I will also include a link to previous PowerPoints so you can see what people have been doing. And then that might help you to get a better idea. You don't have to write this out. The PowerPoint is photos that you found online dealing with the artist, you know, their work, what the artist looks like, those kinds of things. And then you're going to talk about each one. And it can't be shorter than 3 minutes, and it can't be longer than 5 minutes. So if you look down on this, I included how to make a video in PowerPoint, how to record a PowerPoint presentation with audio and video, how to make it and you don't, if one of these links works or you don't get it, if one of these links works, just use that. And if you don't get it, use, watch the others and see if that will help you. And then at the bottom here, this link here takes you to a page that looks like this that shows PowerPoint presentations other students have already done. So go through and look at that. And I want you to get working on this as soon as you can. If you're unable to upload it to your YouTube or Vimeo account and you can't, and you're unable to send a link, that's fine. Just let me know and we'll figure something else out. Okay. So before you ask me any questions about this, before you email anything about it, I want you to go right here, click on PowerPoint Artist Presentations, and watch at least 3 of what people have done, 3 examples. We do have a written reflection for this module as well. Learn about 6 contemporary artists. And what I need you to do is, I want you to think about what makes contemporary art contemporary art. So think about this for half an hour before you start writing. Do you think contemporary art is an art period or an art movement, and why? Then which of the 6 artists is your favorite and which is your least favorite, and explain why. And is what something that one of them makes you don't see how it can be art? Respond to that as well. I want you to remember the tools of describe, analyze, interpret, evaluate, the tools of artistic critique, and apply them to what you saw with the 6 contemporary artists. Remember that page is broken open. It's this one. These are the 6 artists that you're referring to. And then and write your thoughts about this. So try to address each of these 3 bullet points. This one, favorite artist, least favorite artist. Does any of the artists make something that you don't think is art, and why? So there aren't correct answers to this. I just want you to give your observations. What makes contemporary art contemporary art? And do you think contemporary art is an art period or an art movement, and why? So however you want to answer those is great, but you get points for working out an answer and explaining what you're thinking, not points for matching what I believe. And I think what I'm going to do is edit this, so I will have a link to those 6 artists right in here, so that you can see that, you know, these are the 6 artists that you're dealing with. All right, I think I'll do that right after we're done. Now for your studio exercise, I want you to think about Basquiat. Wheat paste is something that has been used for ages, or for generations at least, to glue those handbills up, those different things. And this is a good example of street art. And you can really see there are some graphic elements here with the lettering, stuff like that. You see some posters glued up. You see some spray paint applied and paintbrush paint, stickers. So all those kinds of things. Now, there's 2 parts to this, and some people last term got a little bit confused, but I don't want you to be confused. What you're going to do is make 2 things. You're going to make a fake street art surface, and you're going to make an image to paste onto that. So you're doing 2 things, and then you're going to paste the image onto the fake street art surface. Now, street art is always done on a surface that's been outside for a while. What I want you to do is find a reference of a surface that you would like to recreate. Like, say you like bricks or cement. You're not going to do this on bricks or cement. You're going to make your own version. Then you're going to use different materials to create the illusion of that surface. And the combination of materials can really help. For example, if you're going to be doing something where you want it to look like a brick wall, get a piece of cardboard. Then you can paint it with whatever color the brick is, like yellow or red. Draw in the black lines. Then maybe get some heavier paint to go over the bricks again, so you beef them up and give them a little bit of texture. And then maybe even sprinkle it with something white, like white paint or anything like that, to give it a little bit of visual texture. And then that becomes your fake street art surface. And you can look up online different references. Then you're going to make a wheat paste or an image on separate paper to paste onto this. And you're going to make your own wheat paste. What I prefer to do for this kind of thing, when I create an image to paste onto something else, I try to find like a lighter paper. Like regular printer paper is going to be a lot better than tag board, for example. And then you can make your image whatever you want to do, whatever that image is. Use the materials you want to. You can use crayon, pencil, whatever. And then you're going to cut or tear it out after you're finished making it. What I would recommend size-wise is make your fake street art surface maybe a foot tall and 15 inches wide. And then make your image to paste onto it maybe 2 or 3 inches wide, maybe 5 inches tall, 6 inches tall. And what makes this piece successful is if you do several of these. So this describes how to make wheat paste, and just follow the directions right here. Start by laying down a layer of wheat paste, stick your image to the surface, cover your image in wheat paste. That's all you got to do. And then that where you're laying it down is on the fake street art surface. Do not do this on a sidewalk or your home or anything like that. You make the surface to paste it on. And then the whole project is your items pasted on that surface. Now, one of the things that makes Basquiat's stuff really exciting is that he does several of these. He'll paste something down, then he'll do a layer of paint over it, not over the whole thing, but just maybe some squirts of paint or some dabs or some splashes. Then when that dries, sometimes even while it's still wet, he'll do another layer, he'll paste something else on top, and he'll do that a couple times. And that is a really good way to go. That creates something with depth, and it's interesting. Painting over, every time you lay something down and paint over it again, just very lightly or with translucent paint, it gives a sense of depth, and it makes the later stuff that you paste on top of it really feel like it's on top and more present. So they can be a fun project to do. And this is where you turn in your stunning and amazing PowerPoint. We just went over these things again just a minute ago. The description of how to make it, and then also where to go to look for examples. And then this discussion, you get points basically for pasting up your, or for sharing your PowerPoint presentation. And then the rest of the points you get for picking one other video to watch and comment on. And you're going to do 4 sentences. The first one, you're going to spend a sentence to describe the style of the art that they showed in their video. Like say they're doing something on one of the artists is Sandy Skoglund. So maybe, and you're going to describe what you see with her stuff. And her stuff looks a little surreal. It's usually rooms that are set up sometimes with models, and then she paints everything one color and brings in a contrasting color of animals or other forms like that she puts in. So that's a description. The second one is analyze. You talk about how did she make it? Maybe she made the animals with plaster. Maybe this was all furniture that she found in garage sales and then spray painted. Interpret, what does it mean? We scan the art that you were introduced to in that person's video has to do with disconnection, people feeling disconnected, or maybe it has to do with connection, people wanting to connect. And the different elements mean different things to you in light of that interpretation. And so you share that in one sentence. And then the 4th sentence is just sharing whether or not you think that this is successful. So this is 20 points possible. You get 10 points for posting your own work, and then 10 points for writing those 4 things as a comment on somebody else's work. All right, I hope that sounds good. Hope you guys understand all that. We've gone for quite a while, talking for a bit, and I'm hoping that you guys get all this, and I hope that you, like I said, I hope you understand what we've been talking about. If you have any questions, let me know. We'll go over it again next week. Oh, and one last thing I forgot. I promised that we would talk about the final project. So give me just a second here as I pull that up. Your final project is creating something for the Mali Empire. We've gone back to that a couple times. We got an opportunity to talk about the Jenne horsemen, and this is interesting because this art is not something that you've typically seen before. And this is a real application of the 4 elements or 4 tools of artistic critique. In that assignment where you have to post your PowerPoint, you're applying the 4 tools of artistic critique directly to the art that you see in somebody else's PowerPoint. For this, what you're going to be doing is synthesizing your uniqueness with that of another culture, using those 4 tools to help you find your way. This is the final project of the class. It's the most significant project of the class. And you have about a month to do it. So I want you to be thinking about, because this will be due, I think that this will be due on the last day of finals. So December 15th. Let's see, I think it says December 10th, but I'm thinking we're going to change that to December 15th so everybody is able to do it and you get extra time. But I want you to revisit the references that we've already made to Sundiata and his Mali Empire and your brainstorming that you did in Module 6. Use your critical thinking skills as you look at the Mali artwork and think about what makes it Mali artwork. Then I want you to make something, reference your brainstorming and make something that didn't exist in the Mali Empire, but should have, like a cell phone or a water park. But make it so that it looks specific to the Mali Empire. Make it look like artists at that time actually did it. And do your best to make it look like it's constructed from materials that were available to the people at the time. Now, for example, terracotta, you don't have to use terracotta to make something. You can make your own salt clay and then paint it to look like terracotta. Several people have done that. But when you're done, I want you to have the project so it looks like it belonged to the Mali Empire. There are a number of components that are really critical to this. Time and planning. You're going to spend 2 hours researching and planning. That means 2 hours. In that 2 hours, you're going to do your research and sketch it out. And you need to spend 5 hours building it, whatever it is. And that 5 hours building could be, if you have to make salt clay, then you make salt clay, and that counts as part of it. So if it takes you a half an hour to make salt clay, then you only need to spend 4.5 hours sculpting the salt clay. Critical thinking comes into play because you are looking at the things you saw in the Mali Empire and trying to figure out what visual markers make that stuff stand out as Milanese. And then you're going to be adapting that to create the form that you're generating. Now the scope, you need to be aware of that. How fast do you work and how much can you do in the time that you have to do? So you're going to have to recognize that creating an animated feature is not going to be appropriate, but neither is drawing something into the sand. This needs to be something that's constructed. Now, one person went, and because they understood about clay, they went and collected clay from one of the river banks near us, and they cleaned it up and created something out of that clay. And that was their project. They'd done the research as to where they could find the clay, how to make it, and they created something that was a contemporary, I think it was like a cell phone container, but making it so that it looked like it was, if cell phone containers existed in the Mali Empire, that's what it would have looked like. It was made out of that clay that they harvested themselves. I don't want you to have to go and buy materials. You can collect materials as long as they're safe to collect, like in your own yard and stuff like that. Or you can use things that you already have and make them look like materials. Paper mache clay, you can find out how to make that. That's a really good option for clay, and salt dough as well. Whenever you make something like clay or paper mache or salt dough or paint, anything like that, make sure first that you're keeping costs down as much as possible. Use as much as possible what you have in the home already. But also I want you to do this over a garbage bag so you can just throw everything away. I don't want you to rinse anything down the sink because that will clog the sink, and I don't want you to do that. Now this is a final project, so pay attention to workmanship. If you have a great idea, but you get bored halfway through and slap it together, that's not going to do very well. I want you to be aware of how long this is taking, how long it should take you, and what you're doing, and do a good job on it. If you spend, I guarantee you, if you spend more than 5 hours putting this together, more than 7 hours total, you will get a better grade than if you only spend a couple hours total. Because time really shows in the workmanship. And then just follow the directions for submitting. I would recommend putting all this stuff together in one PDF document and just submitting the PDF. Or if it's more comfortable for you to make a docx, do that. But follow the directions. All right. So I'm going to go back as soon as we're done tonight. I'm going to make sure that video is posted. And if you want extra credits, extra credit points, you can watch the LN at Sweet video and comment on that as well. So, all right, I hope that helps. I hope everybody understands kind of what's going on. And as you're reading things, I've tried to put in links to videos that show what I'm talking about. And again, the reflection that you write has to be on the 6 artists that are within that module for that. And that's true for all the reflections. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about the remaining weeks of the class and then what we're going to do for the rest of the time. All right. And I will be working on getting caught up on grading everything as well. Thank you so much for being with me this week, and I look forward to, sorry about that, I forgot to stop sharing. I look forward to visiting with you again next week. And I hope you guys are having a great semester as things wind up, and I hope you're not getting stressed out. If you do feel things getting out of hand, you do feel stressed, please talk to my friends over at the accommodations office here on campus. You can find them pretty easily just by going to the Utah Tech Main website, type in accommodations, and they can help you advise you on who to talk to or what you need to do to work with your teachers. So feel free, I would recommend heartily to go and visit with them. My friend Baco is over there, and everybody in the office is really, really good at what they do. All right, thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend.